Hi, my name's Lawrence and I'm an instructor here with Northern Industrial Training. Today we're going to be doing a walkthrough on a pre-trip for a Class B passenger vehicle. The information for this inspection will be taken from the Alaska State CDL manual. In your own state or location, you will also have access to this information from your own state's resources that will be very similar to what we're covering. So let's go ahead and get started on our Class B passenger pre-trip inspection. We're going to begin our inspection with the passenger entry into the bus. We're going to inspect and make sure that our passenger entry lights are properly functioning and illuminating. We also have two more on the inside of the doors that are also illuminated. That way everyone can see where they're going. We're going to check the doors. The door seals are not cut or torn. They are intact. The door hinges are secure and the doors aren't sagging. They'll close securely when we're ready to drive. And then on the inside of the bus, our grab handles are securely mounted and our steps are free of any obstructions or tripping hazards. Starting on the interior of the bus, we're going to check our emergency equipment. So we're going to go ahead and open up our compartment here and we're going to check to make sure that we have a fire extinguisher which is fully charged. It's secured in place with a safety tag and has a current inspection date. We have our 3 retroreflective triangles here in our container, and over here we have some spare fuses and light bulbs. And then we're going to make sure that our compartment is closed and secured, and we're going to begin our inspection down the rest of the interior of the bus. As we continue our inspection on the interior of the bus, we're going to go ahead and walk down the aisle all the way to the end of the bus, and we're checking to make sure that the seats are securely mounted. There's no obstructions in the aisleway, and that the luggage racks are secure, and any luggage that was in those needs to be secured in a way that it's not going to fall and create a hazard for someone. We'll also be checking the emergency exits. On the side windows, those emergency exits are open by pulling out the rope seal and kicking the window out. So we're not going to check those, but we will make sure that they're free of obstructions. And we'll check our top hatches and our rear exit to make sure that they do function and the associated alarms sound as required. And so now we're going to go ahead and inspect the rear emergency exit. We're going to make sure that it opens and closes and that we get a buzzer when it is open. As we make our way back to the front of the bus, I'm going to go ahead and check our hatch emergency exits. We're going to make sure that they both open and that the emergency buzzer sounds. Got our buzzer, hatch opens, closes and locks, and the buzzer goes out. Now we're going to do the same thing at the front hatch. So our front hatch emergency exit here, it opens and closes securely, and we do get an emergency buzzer. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the driver's seat and do the engine start and the rest of the in-cab pre-trip inspection on the bus. So now that we're back at the front of the bus, we're going to go ahead and take a seat. We're going to put on our seatbelt and continue on with the pre-trip inspection. As I put on my seatbelt, I'm going to check to make sure that there are no cuts or frays. It latches and unlatches. We're going to perform a safe start on the vehicle now. We'll make sure the transmission is in neutral, the parking brake is applied. Then I'm going to turn the key to the run position, and I'm looking for the ABS light and the rest of the dashboard lights to come on, and that ABS light should then go out. And that's when I know that the vehicle's safe to start and that there's not a fault in the ABS system. So key to the run position, ABS light comes on, goes back off with the rest of the lights. My wait to start light went off. And after the vehicle starts, I'm immediately going to check my oil pressure to make sure that it climbs to its normal operating range within about the first few seconds. Our battery voltage on our voltmeter climbs to its normal operating range between 12 and 15 volts. Our water temperature is beginning a slow climb but steady to its normal operating range of about 195 degrees. The water temperature is not excessively high and there's no warning light indicating that the engine's overheating. My air pressure is built to its normal operating range within 100 and 125 psi. Now I'm going to go ahead and check my windshield wipers and washer fluid. So my wipers wipe a nice clean path on the windshield without streaking. I don't see any damaged blades on the wipers, and my washer fluid is working properly. I'm going to go ahead and check my heater and defroster. On this bus, the heater and defroster is operated by rocker switches over here beside my left knee. So I'm going to turn those on. And I was placing my hands across the vents to make sure that an adequate amount of warm air was getting out of the heater there so that we don't have any frozen windows or excessive mist buildup in the bus. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to test my instrument indicator lights. My right turn signal indicator on the dashboard is functioning. Left turn signal indicator. My four-way flashers indicator is functioning, as well as my high beam indicator. Now I'm going to go ahead and test my electric horn as well as the air horn, all of which function properly. We're going to go ahead and move into the brake test portion, and initially we're just going to go ahead and tug against the parking brakes and make sure that the parking brakes are functioning properly. So place the vehicle in drive. Can't pull through the parking brakes, so I'll place the vehicle back in neutral. So my parking brake test is good. I'm going to release the parking brakes, and I'm going to test the service brakes by pulling forward. So I'm going to place the vehicle in drive, move forward at about 5 miles an hour, firmly apply the brakes, and ensure that the bus comes to a safe stop and doesn't pull to the left or right. Then we'll go ahead and we'll place the vehicle in neutral. And what we're looking for is flatter level ground. If we didn't have flatter level ground, we would want to chalk the tires to make sure that the bus doesn't roll, because it's very important that we have the parking brakes released. And now we're going to look at our air pressure gauge and make sure that it's built up to a governed cutoff pressure of 125 psi. And it is up to 125 psi, so we're going to begin our 3-step brake test. We're going to turn the engine off. We're going to retrieve our timing device. We're going to turn the key to the run position so that I have all my warning indicators. Double check, make sure that my parking brake is released, that dash valve is pushed in. And now we're going to fully apply the service brake. And you'll see an initial loss in the air pressure gauge as the brakes are applied, and then it'll stabilize. Now that it is stabilized, I'm going to start my timer, and we're going to wait for 1 minute. And I'm observing our air pressure gauge to ensure that I don't see a loss of pressure greater than 3 psi in 1 minute's time. If I saw a loss of pressure, that could indicate that there is a leak. Because we have air applied to our parking brake system, since the dash valve is pushed in and our emergency brakes released, and we have our foot depressed on the service brake pedal, means we have air also applied to the service brake system. A loss of pressure during this test could indicate that we have a leak in our brake system. And I also opened the side window here so that I could listen for any audible air leaks at the same time. So as we're starting to come up on 1 minute's time, I have not seen a loss of any pressure, which is great on our air pressure gauge, and anything in excess of 3 psi in 1 minute's time would not allow us to drive this vehicle. So we're at 1 minute, we didn't see any loss of pressure. That's great. We'll go ahead, we'll move on to the next step of our brake test, which is going to be to check to ensure that if a leak develops on the road, that we have a warning device, a low air warning, telling us that the pressure is dropping dangerously low in our air tanks, and we need to pull over as soon as safe to do so and park the vehicle until we can get it repaired. We're going to bleed the air out of the system by stepping on and releasing the brake pedal, and we should see a low air warning device that is visual, and in this case it will be audible as well, and it'll sound and display at or before 55 psi. So just above 60 psi, we have our low air indicator, a light in the dashboard, and also an audible warning. And the final step of our 3-step brake test is to check to make sure that our parking brake applies between 20 and 45 psi. So I'll continue to bleed the pressure down. I'll watch my air pressure gauge, and when that pops out, I know my emergency brakes, my dash valve pops out, I know my emergency brakes have applied. So right about 45 psi, my dash valve popped out, indicating my parking brakes have applied. And now we're going to do another safe start, transmission in neutral, park brake set. And to complete the pre-trip inspection on the inside of the cab here, we'll go ahead and do an exterior light operations check. We're going to begin the exterior pre-trip inspection on the bus, starting at the front, and we're going to look top to bottom, beginning with our lights up top. We have several marker lights and clearance lights, one on each side. Those need to be securely mounted, not cracked, broken, or damaged, not full of moisture, and they need to be the proper color, which is amber. My mirrors on both sides, securely mounted and not cracked or broken. We check the adjustment from the inside. And on my windshields, I'm checking to make sure that there are no cracks longer than about 4 inches, no rock chips bigger than about a dime, and no illegal stickers. And our windshield wipers from the outside here, we did check them inside for function. Out here, we're making sure that there's no blades missing off of the windshield wiper and that the arms are not bent and that they have adequate tension to the windshield. We have a turn signal, one on each side, securely mounted, no cracks, no moisture in the lights, and they are the proper color, which is amber. Our headlight assemblies, again, one on each side, securely mounted, no cracks, no moisture, and they are of the proper color, which in this case is just a clear lens on the light. We'll check to make sure that our front bumper is securely mounted and level to the ground. If it's not level to the ground, when we approach the vehicle, it could be a good indicator that we have a defective suspension component or possibly a flat tire. Now we're going to go ahead and move to the side and continue our pre-trip inspection down the side of the vehicle. We're going to continue our pre-trip inspection on the driver's side of the bus, and we're going to start here by looking at some of our reflectors. In this case, we have one reflector securely mounted, not cracked or broken. It is amber in color, as is required to be. We also have several lights down the side of the bus. Turn signal, which is securely mounted, not cracked, not full of moisture. And it is the proper color, which is amber. And here at the front of the bus, there are a few components that are very difficult to see, and even as we continue on back down the bus. So we're going to start with our steering shaft, and our steering shaft needs to be securely mounted, not cracked, broken, or damaged. There should be no side-to-side play in the steering shaft, and no greater than 10 degrees or 2 inches of rotational play on a 20-inch steering wheel. And that'll take us into our steering gearbox, which is securely mounted, not cracked or broken. The hoses that go to and from the steering gearbox should be secured at the fittings. No abrasions, bulges, cuts in the lines, and no leaks. From the steering gearbox, our pitman arm is securely mounted, not cracked or broken, and it is securely connected to the drag link with a castle nut and cotter key. Neither the pitman arm or the drag link is bent, broken, or damaged. And that attaches to the steering knuckle in behind the wheel here. Again, with a castle nut and cotter key, not cracked, bent, or broken. And our tie rod, which connects the front 2 steering tires together, securely mounted with castle nuts and cotter pins, and not cracked or broken. We're going to talk about the frame, suspension, brakes, and tires on the bus. So here at the front, our frame, as far forward and rearward as we can see, is not bent, broken, or damaged, with no non-factory welds. We have mounts that attach the leaf springs to the frame of the bus. They are securely mounted and not cracked, bent, or broken. The leaf springs are securely connected to the axle with U-bolts. Those U-bolts are not cracked, bent, or broken, and no shiny metal indicating that something's loose and rubbing back and forth. The leaf springs are not cracked, missing, or misaligned. And our shock absorber is securely mounted top and bottom, and it is not cracked or broken, and there are no leaks from the shock absorber. Our brakes, we have a brake hose, which is securely connected. The fittings are tight. There's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts in the brake hose, and no leaks from the brake hose. And that attaches to our brake chamber, which is securely mounted to the vehicle. It also has a belly clamp around the middle of it, which is secure, not cracked, bent, or broken. And the chamber itself is securely mounted to the bus. There are no leaks from the brake chamber. Our slack adjuster and push rod is securely mounted with a clevis pin and cotter key and not cracked, bent, or broken. And there is no more than 1 inch of free play with the brakes released. Our brake linings are not worn dangerously thin and not contaminated with oil or grease. And our brake drums are securely mounted and not cracked and not broken or rewelded. Our tires, we have no abrasions, bulges, or cuts on the sidewalls, either inner or outer. Our tread itself is evenly worn, and we have a minimum of 4/32 of an inch of tread depth in every major groove on our steer tires. We're going to check our valve stem. Our valve stem has a cap and is not leaking, and we will ensure that the tires are inflated to the correct pressure with a tire pressure gauge. Because this is a passenger vehicle, we also need to make sure that these steer tires are not recapped or regrooved. On our rim, we see no obstructions or damage to the bead around the rim. The rim itself is not cracked, not broken, not rewelded, and not excessively rusty. Our lug nuts are all tight. We see that there is no excessive rust, no air gap behind the lug nuts, no snail trails or rust streaks on the rim indicating a loose lug nut. If we ever found indication of a loose lug nut, we would want to be sure to tighten with a torque wrench. And our hub seal is securely mounted. It has all the fasteners in place, and there are no leaks from the hub seal. And now we're going to go ahead and move down the side of the bus. Moving down the side of the bus, we come to a baggage compartment, and we're going to check to make sure that that is closed and locked. We'll also, while we're here, inspect our mid reflector here on the side of the bus, securely mounted, not cracked or broken. It is the proper color, which is amber. Now we'll make sure our baggage compartment both opens and closes and is locked in place. And now we'll go ahead and move to the rear of the bus and again talk about frame, suspension, brakes, and tires. Now we got to the rear axle. We're going to check the frame as far forward and rearward as we can see again, and it's not cracked, bent, or broken. There's no non-manufactured welds on the frame. And then we'll check our suspension. Just like in the front, we have suspension mounts mounting the leaf springs to the frame, which need to be secure and not cracked, bent, or broken. Our leaf springs are securely mounted to the axle with U-bolts, which are tight and not cracked or broken, and there's no shiny metal. Because this is the rear suspension, we do have a control arm. It kind of looks like another leaf spring that goes from the spring mount back to the axle of the bus. So we want to check and make sure that's securely mounted, not cracked, bent, or broken. Our shock absorber is securely mounted top and bottom. There's no cracks and no leaks from the shock absorber. Our brakes will be the same as in the front. We have brake hose, which comes from the frame to the brake chamber, securely mounted, which means the fittings are tight on both ends. There's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts in the brake hose, and no audible air leaks from the brake hose. And a note that on ABS-equipped vehicles, such as this bus, on both the front and rear brake hose, there's also going to be an ABS wire attached. So just make sure that ABS wire is securely attached and won't get caught on any components. And there's no cuts or frays or exposed wires. Our brake chamber is securely mounted to the bus. It has intact belly bands, which are not bent or broken, and there's no audible air leaks from the brake chamber. Our slack adjuster and push rod is securely connected together with a clevis pin and cotter key, and is not cracked, bent, or broken, and it has no more than 1 inch of free play. Our brake linings are not worn dangerously thin and not contaminated with oil or grease, and our brake drums are securely mounted, no cracks, no breaks, and they're not re-welded. Our tires here on the back, these happen to be dual wheels. So for our dual wheels, we have a special inspection point in between what's often referred to as the bud spacing. There should be no daylight, no gap between the rims, and in between the tires, we don't want any debris stuck between the tires. Sidewalls, just like the front, have no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. The tread is not worn unevenly, and there's no less than 2/32 of an inch of tread depth in every major groove on the rear tires. Our valve stem has a cap, and there are no leaks from the valve stem. We'll check tire inflation with a tire pressure gauge, and both tires are the same type and same size. Our rim has no damage around the bead. The rim inside has no cracks, no breaks, is not bent or re-welded. Our lug nuts are secured to the rim, and I don't see any daylight behind the lug nuts, no rust tracking, don't have any indication of a loose lug nut. If I did, I would go ahead and tighten that with a torque wrench. And behind the lug nuts and on the rim itself, there's no excess rust. Our axle seal is securely mounted. It's secured in place, and there are no leaks from the axle seal. There's also a reflector, because it is at the rear. It is supposed to be red in color. It's also securely mounted, not cracked or broken. And a couple of things underneath. We have our mud flap behind the tire, which is securely mounted. It covers the width of the tire, and there's no holes or tears in the mud flap. And between the rear axle and the transmission on the bus is a drive shaft. The drive shaft is secure and not cracked, bent, or broken, with no loose U-joints. And from here, we'll go ahead and move to the back and begin our inspection on the rear of the vehicle in the engine compartment. At the rear of the bus, we'll go ahead, we'll do a top to bottom approach just like we did at the front of the bus. We're looking at our lights up top, we have 3 marker lights and 2 side clearance lights, 1 on each side, securely mounted, no cracks, no moisture, and proper color here at the rear of the vehicle is red. We're looking at our brake lights, and 1 on this side, 1 on the other side, securely mounted. We also have these guys down here, also brake lights. No cracks, no moisture in the lenses, proper color, which is red for our brake lights. We have turn signals back here. This one and the one on the opposite side, securely mounted, no cracks, no moisture. And because these are turn signals, they are allowed to be amber in color, so that is correct. We have backup lights, reverse lights, securely mounted, no cracks, no moisture, and clear is the proper color for those. We have 2 red reflectors, 1 on each side. At the bottom rear corners, securely mounted, no cracks, and of course red is the proper color back here. We also have a license plate identification light, which does work. We have a lens which is clean, and it has a clear lens on it, which is proper. We'll do the same approach back here, making sure the bumper level to the ground, securely mounted. And because our engine compartment is back here, we'll also take note to make sure that there are no leaks underneath the vehicle. And now we'll go ahead, we'll open the hood and inspect the engine compartment. In the engine compartment, we'll move from left to right. And the first thing we're going to look at is our emergency lights. They're red in color, which is proper, and they have no cracks, no moisture inside the lens, are securely mounted. We're going to look at our coolant level. We have a sight glass on the radiator, and we can see that we do have coolant in the sight glass, so we have proper level of coolant. We're going to look at our hoses. We have some hard piping, we have some silicone, we have clamps on those. Anything that's rubber or silicone, we need to make sure there's no abrasions, bulges, cuts, and no leaks. All the clamps need to be tight and not cracked, bent, or broken. And any of these coolant pipes, anything with oil or any other fluid moving through it, we need to make sure that there are no leaks. We'll go ahead and we'll move on to our belt-driven alternator. And we have some wiring going in and out and around the alternator, so we'll check to make sure that there are no cut or frayed wires, no exposed wires, no damaged insulation, and all the connections are tight. This alternator is securely mounted, and the belt that drives it has no more than 3/4 of an inch of free play, and it's not cut or frayed. We have our water pump, which is securely mounted. It is also belt driven, and there are no leaks from the water pump. Now we do have a dipstick up here for our transmission. On this vehicle, it's equipped with an Allison automatic transmission, so only trained and authorized maintenance personnel should check and adjust the transmission fluid level. So be sure to check your company policy and procedure if you suspect that the transmission fluid is low. We have on the opposite side of the engine a couple of gear-driven accessories. We have a gear-driven air compressor and power steering pump. Both are securely mounted and not leaking. All of the hoses going to and from are securely mounted. The fittings are tight. There's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and no leaks from any of the hoses. We have engine oil fill on top of the engine, which is closed and locked and not leaking. We have our dipstick, and to check the engine oil, we'll remove the dipstick, wipe it clean, reinsert, and then when we pull it out, we'll make sure that the oil level is in between the add and full marks on the dipstick. We have power steering fluid reservoir. The cap is on tight. The reservoir is securely mounted. There are no leaks, and we inspect via a dipstick, and we'll pull the dipstick out just like we did with the engine oil, wipe it clean and reinsert, and it should be in between the add and full marks on the dipstick. On the side of the engine, we have our turbocharger, and off the back of that turbocharger is exhaust, which wraps down and around behind the engine and then back out right here underneath the bumper. So we'll check to make sure with all of those connections that there is no soot, which could indicate a leak from the exhaust system, that all the clamps are tight and nothing is cracked, broken, or missing. And now that we're wrapped up here underneath the hood, we'll go ahead and inspect the fuel tank on the passenger side of the vehicle. The only unique item on the passenger side that we need to inspect is the fuel tank. The cap on the fuel tank should be tight, secure, with no leaks. The fuel tank itself is secured to the frame of the vehicle with steel straps that have rubber insulators underneath. The rubber insulators are not cut or torn. And the fuel tank and any associated crossover fittings or lines has no leaks in it. And that completes the pre-trip inspection on our Class B passenger vehicle.